So even though I've never taken any professional anatomy courses before, I've still managed to be able to regularly draw pretty good full-bodied poses like this time and time again. Now, the secret is that I've been able to teach myself a way to easily study bodies without having to spend too much time getting into the complexity of the human anatomy. Today, I want to teach you exactly how I taught myself how to draw people, but the first step is to get back to the basics. And when I say basics, I'm talking about the basics, like preschool basics. I'm talking about shapes. So there are 4 basic forms that you must understand before we can get started. The first is the cube, the second is the sphere, and the third is the cylinder, and then the fourth is the pyramid. Now, I also quickly want to refresh you on your shapes just in case you forgot them from preschool. I know some of you are starting to get very concerned right now, but don't worry, we only need to remember 3 of them. These include the rectangle or parallelogram or square, the triangle, and the ellipse. So basically what we're going to do is just straight up trace these drawings from our reference. No, I'm just kidding. I know tracing is a huge taboo, but stick with me here. This right here that we're doing is very different. Regular tracing is simply looking at lines and copying them mindlessly without making any new neurological connections. What we are going to do is to use our shapes and forms to deconstruct the references into something much easier for our brains to understand. Not only are we going to draw things that don't actually exist on the reference, but we are going to train our minds to identify the major forms and shapes to learn aesthetics, proportions, and shape language. Now, this may seem very easy, but we won't be actually using our tracings for the final drawing. We're going to put them aside and use them as a guide for doing our own drawings over again from scratch. Now, before we get started, I quickly wanted to give a shout out to vizref. This is an amazing app that I have had the pleasure of beta testing, and it allows you to collect several references into one app like this. I've actually collected several images into my camera roll and then brought them all in at once so that I could use this as a reference. And so I really recommend this app. It's on the App Store. What it allows you to do is you can press the plus icon here and insert photos or place from your clipboard, or you can actually drag and drop images straight from your Safari app right into this app. All you need to do is swipe up from the bottom, bring up Safari like this from the right, and then you're good to go. I will be using this app for the video when we're looking at our reference to emulate, and using this to also look at our reference and our own guides at the same time, so I'll come back to this later. So let's go ahead and get started identifying the major shapes in these references. I decided to go ahead and choose references that would be easy and difficult, and then also err on the side of shapes rather than forms or vice versa, so that you would be able to do this easily on your own and not have the same dilemma when the math teacher does the easiest assignments in class and then gives you the hardest ones for homework. So this guy is in a really dynamic pose, which can be really difficult. For me, I know exactly my problem would be making sure that the distance between his chest here and where his legs start doesn't get too long. I have a tendency to do that a lot. And so when we're going to break this down into shapes, I'm going to kind of go off of what I know. You can see a lot of his clothing is obscuring the forms that we can see. So why don't we go ahead and start with the forms that we know are there. So his head, I also want to pay special attention to, because this is really key. You know, when you're drawing a character like this, you want their head to be in the right perspective. So knowing how heads work, I'm going to draw a sphere. This is how I normally like to represent heads. And then again, you can look at it like this and draw the curved triangle like that. But in this case, I really want to make sure that we know what direction he's facing. So I'm going to represent his face as this shape that you see me draw here. This shape, the mask shape that I've coined my mask method from earlier videos, is this diamond shape there. And so that shape is what I'm going to use to kind of help place how his head is working here. So this is the top of the diamond, and then this is that corner, and then that corner is going to come down to the point there, and then the same thing would happen here, but since it's at an angle, it just comes off as one line. And so now I'm going to use this line to curve back around here, and then use an ellipse to kind of draw the cross section of his head where his eyebrows would be. And so that's how I naturally now understand heads. I like to draw a cross section where the eyebrow is so I can understand the direction that the head is facing. And so this plane of the head is pretty much flat. We're going to pretend that that's a flat edge of a box right there. And then I'm going to draw another cross section here, and then that would be the other side. So if I hide this reference, hopefully you're starting to see this as this type of shape here, where there's a cylinder or an ellipse. It comes down like this and then comes down like that. So this would be where the face sits, and then this would be where the ear sits, and then the head would come back around like this, like that. So it's a pretty complex set of forms and shapes, but it will help you to make sure your head is facing in the right direction right there. So this isn't exactly in the same perspective, but it still emphasizes the same things that I want you to pay attention to here. And you can see why it's still always good to start with a sphere, even though we're chopping the sides off to make it flat. So if I go on with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the legs, because usually that's the easiest place. I'm going to draw these ellipses here, set up the cylinder. Just want to cut the cylinder off right below the knees. Have that cylinder right there, like this. So we're already understanding the proportion for his legs there. So here I can see a little bit of where his pants are, even though where his pants stop at his waist, even though his shirt goes down pretty far. So I'm going to use that and just set up a really big cylinder here to represent his waist. And so from there, what I'm going to do is just kind of imagine a shape that's going like this. This isn't anatomically correct at all. You don't have, your legs don't really do this. They usually, you know, they're interrupted by your butt somewhere at some point. But I'm just going to draw this down just so I can understand the form and the energy that's going on here. And so I can identify this right here. So you can kind of visualize the sphere again for his knee. It's kind of like a, I don't know, like a squashed sphere. And then I'm going to draw an ellipse here to represent that end of the cylinder. And then so we can understand that curve going on here. I'm going to draw another cylinder like this. And remember that there's a squashed sphere right there for his knee. And then just bring that up. And then just extend that like that. And then here, I see there's a really, really tight crease here in the shirt. So that must be a division of where the form is. So what I'm going to do is kind of separate his torso into two parts to where he has this upper part like this, and this is the part that's facing towards us. And I'm just going to connect that as a cylinder like this. Boom. So it's helping me break down his movement and his energy into one shape that can help me inform my drawing later on. And so now I know his arm is going to connect into his torso. So I'm going to draw a big old cylinder or ellipse like this, just so that's where his arm connects. I don't see it here, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line right there just to simplify that, and here. And so now what I want you to start to see is there's this line coming down here. Hopefully this is going, ideally this would be going down his sternum, and then there would be a line here. This would be going down his navel. And so we can kind of visualize that twisting motion as well. And so that would be a simplification of his torso again. And this is basically just, you know, a box like this. Like that. This is random changing perspective lines, but hopefully you can get the idea. Where I would cut this out, I would just take a circle and just smooth that out. And then I'm going to take this edge and I would just kind of cut that shape out right there. And then I would make this bottom part an ellipse like this. So I would cut off those corners. And then I would draw a dotted line to represent the back of it. And so you see, it's really, really easy. You just take that basic shape that you understand, you add the parts that you need and subtract the parts that you need, and then you rotate it in space. And that's basically what we have here. It's really like this. But yeah, that's basically what we have here. And that's what I drew up here. So I can understand, okay, even if I were to think about lighting, if I know how to light a box, I know how to light this part where I decide where the light is in general, and then I can start coming back into the details and adding all of these wrinkles. And so if we go back up right here, you know, that's where the wrist, where his wrist starts, is probably going to be a lot smaller than that. And then we can see this is where his elbow is. Identify that bend. Actually, that elbow is almost exactly like right on the line of the camera, so that ellipse is going to be very thin. And then his arm is going back into space like that, so we're going to see a little bit more of that ellipse. And then we're going to draw the cylinder. and then do the same thing here. And then we have that. And so if I hide the reference, you can see we're really understanding the shape. Not, this definitely does not look like an anatomy drawing, but we're really starting to understand this. So when I wanted to do my own right next to it, right after, my brain is going to be able to relate all of this quickly, and it's going to think that I'm drawing it myself from scratch, and it's going to basically start training itself to see things broken down into these kind of systems. And then we're going to really start being able to draw things like from reference really easily going forward. With this one, I really want to get into the nitty gritty here and show you how I would break this down for myself with the torso. So in this kind of reference, I would use some stuff as basic shapes, but I really want to get into the details when I get into her torso here. So instead of just breaking this down into shapes, I would want to use forms. So I would quickly try to identify, this is where you can kind of say this is tracing, I guess, but I would want to identify the center line. And so I'm going to go down her sternum here, and then at the top of her rib cage, and then come back down to where her belly and her navel is. And then so from here, I'm going to identify, I see this planal surface here that's going down. So I'm going to use that as a cutoff point along with her bra that she's wearing, or tank top. And then I'm just going to draw an ellipse here. And then I'm going to draw a circle or an ellipse here. And then another one here, since I can see that that's the shoulder, and I'm going to kind of estimate that that's how that's connecting. And so I'm going to bring this down together like that, following that shape. And then I'm going to just bring this up here and then do the same thing with the front of the shape like that. And then I'd really want to try my best to visualize the side of it. So I'm really trying to represent this as a four-sided shape that's been cropped off on the sides to allow the elbows to fit into. And so I do the same thing here, except I'm identifying, okay, that her hips are starting to play. So what I would do here is I would draw an ellipse like this to represent where her belly's starting and where the forms of her ribs are starting to not emphasize the shape of the anatomy again, and then bring that down smoothly in towards like that. And then I'd use the shape, and I'm sure that her pants would probably be making this kind of shape like this if the Gucci bag wasn't in the way. So I'm going to bring that around and really try to emphasize that ellipse like that. And so here, I wouldn't pay as much attention to the forms, and I would focus on just simplifying this as two straight cylinders like that. Like this. And I bring this down. Again, that's the other side of her waist there. Bring that down. Bring this up. Bring this up. And then I would just leave it like that there's these forms that become shapes, because a lot of this is just the clothing that's impacting this. And then so for her head, I want to get into this again. I'm going to draw a center line. I'm going to decrease the size of my pen there. Draw a center line. So her head is really this flat shape at the front, like this, right? Boom. So it's like this cutout shape here. And then we have this top area. So I'm going to draw this cylinder like this, or this ellipse. And then that's going to be her head, which is, you can imagine this is like the top half of a sphere. And then basically this whole part right here is just flat. If we go into the nitty gritty, there's really three sides to the face. There's the front side, this tertiary side here, and then this side is really the completely flat side. But we can just represent that as one shape once we get this cut in like that. And so that would represent her head. The cylinder of her neck would be fitting inside of it like that. You could draw another one here. This one's facing that way, and then it kind of curves like that and connect them. And so that's how I would break up her upper body like that. So what I'm going to do now is put this all together in one kind of little demo for you guys. I'm not going to talk during this. I'm just going to speed this up, and I'm going to show you how I would just break this down for myself. And then we're going to talk about how to go forward with this type of practice with your own drawings. So I've went ahead and finished that one out, and what I went ahead and did as well is I separated the arms into a different layer because some of the overlaps for this can get kind of confusing. I already know I'm going to have a lot of trouble with this hand right here, so I went ahead and broke this down into its own set of cubes and then tried to have a landmark for the shape of the thumb and where the fingers would end as well, just trying to help me understand the proportion. With this piece, it's already a great thing to know already that, okay, the hand is actually bigger than the forearm because of that extreme perspective, which is something that I didn't really notice looking at the image head on. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to show both of these here, and then I'm going to export this as a JPEG and save that to my camera roll. I'm going to go ahead and switch to our trusty vizref app here, and I'm going to add that image in. So I'm going to insert photos, go to my recents, and then hit done, and then that image is going to be here, and I'm going to place that right next to the original reference like that. So I can swipe up from vizref, bring up the taskbar here, and then bring in Procreate to the right side, and then now I can create a completely new layer and use both my reference and my guidelines to give me an idea of how to start the sketch. But of course, you know, this video is already super long, so I've already done this and I've already went ahead and started adding the details. And so the goal is for you to eventually not need to draw the shapes that you see in this anymore or have to do that exercise. You want to be able to see those shapes, and then as you see them, you can just naturally transcribe them into your drawing. Now, when you do that, it's going to be a little bit harder. You're going to end up changing some things. That's actually what I did with this piece. I just did the diagramming for you guys. And so the issue is, for me, I had a lot of trouble placing the arms. Things aren't exactly in the same place, but I'm still very happy with the result. I had to change where the pelvis and the hips were to kind of give her a little bit more energy, but the result is still really great for me. It really helped me get this foot in perspective and really get this piece looking energetic and having the proportions exactly how I wanted them. Now, of course, as a disclaimer, I just want to make this clear that this doesn't mean you should never study anatomy, because the more anatomy you know, the easier and better you'll be able to identify these basic shapes. I'm sure some of you, as you saw me drawing some of these shapes, they may not have seemed super intuitive to you, and that's because I have done a little bit of understanding of, okay, what are the parts of the body and what are the basic shapes. Eventually, once you combine studying anatomy and then you combine using this kind of method, you'll be able to draw poses in whatever way you want and then come back and refine them if you need to, so that they're a little bit more believable, and your drawings are just going to skyrocket because you're doing things that are unique and then showing more of a story that you can tell that you may not be able to find a perfect reference to be able to show off. The really main goal with this technique is for you to gain the confidence to start drawing people. If you want to draw full body people, you should just go ahead and start drawing it. I didn't allow myself to draw people like this for so long, but this method has really helped me be able to get confidence that I needed and stop making the same mistakes that I was always making, you know, making people lean, making their torso too long or their hands too big. This really got rid of all of that, and so I was really having fun with my art again. Hopefully now you won't have to draw people with super tight clothing, standing straight up with their hands in their pockets and then leaning to one side like I see so much with the beginner artists. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and clean this sketch up, and that's going to be it for me today. I want all of you to practice this method, and if you do, make sure to tag me in your work on Instagram. And if you want to, go ahead and check out vizref on the App Store. It's going to be super helpful. I use it all the time. I always love seeing what you guys are sharing, by the way, and love sharing it with the rest of the community whenever I can. For those of you who are wondering, yes, I have bought the new iPad Pro, so make sure you subscribe now and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss out on my review in comparison with this 2018 iPad right here. So I've been Ergo Josh, guys. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.